It is nice to see you again with this presentation in this conversation with Badiucao, which is an artist, a Chinese artist based in Australia at the moment, and Simone Pieranni, who is a journalist, keen and very expert of China, living in China for 10 years, and since then also covering a lot of topics about Chinese social situation, politics, and also culture. Badiucao, we discovered your work last year in Brescia with your astonishing exhibition, and now we hope to see you again very soon on our screen, but you are on screen now, and we are going to have an interesting discussion about what is web and democracy in the web, and what is how governments are using in good or bad ways web as a tool of control or as a tool of freedom. So this is our very small issue, but very big topic. So thank you to be with us. And I would like to start with Badi and asking him just to present his action in this platform and how he's working in particular in the web to spread an idea of freedom of speech and freedom of consciousness. Thank you, Badi.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to talk to you, Alai. And again, so yes, I do think internet has this very unique and important role for artists as well as for activists. But on the other hand, Tor is always neutral, which means it can be used to spread information. But on the other hand, it can also be used to spread misinformation, propaganda, or even become tool for extending or exporting the censorship. Um, from my daily practice, I am always very active on Twitter, on Instagram. Those social media platform is not just a place that for me to posting my works, but it's also the place that helping me to know what is happening in China via those people who use like VPN and going around China's censorship and telling what is really going on from inside of China. So I create art which is inspired by those information online. Then I use the platform to showcase my art. And a lot of time, I also think social media can be used as not just a platform, but also material in a way that you can connecting people and make people's interaction and engagement as a part of the art practice, like a lot of performance art, which can only be done by one artist in a traditional form. But now, with the help of social networking, you can send an invitation to hundreds of thousands of people around the world to join you to compose a artwork together.
Thank you, Badi. And I suppose lately you could speak about your performance, collective performance dedicated to the 4th of June. And I would like to introduce Simone Pieranni, and he will help us in understanding what do we mean with the web in China, and to explain us to people that has never been in China, how is working the web in China, and a general overview, if you want, about the control of the web in China.
Okay, it's a pleasure to be here with you. Well, how it works, it's completely controlled by the Communist Party, of course, since the beginning. The Chinese Communist Party built the so-called Great Firewall, that is something like a wall that doesn't allow people to get outside this intranet more than an internet one. And at the beginning, I remember when the US President Bill Clinton went to China at the beginning of the 90s, He said, how with internet we spread out liberty and freedom, and a modem is not a technological object, it's just a way to get freedom. But Chinese Communist Party was able to complete control these the world website. First of all, with the censorship, with the Great Firewall. So, for example, there are a lot of websites and keywords that are forbidden. So you try to, for example, go to New York Times and you can't access to the website. But this is a very simple way. During these years, the censorship by the Communist Party became very sophisticated because we don't have only the websites or the, for example, the blog. At the beginning of 2000, for example, 2005, 2006, there were a lot of bloggers in China, and they try to speak out also, but there were a lot of consequences, bad consequences for that. Now we talk about social media, especially WeChat, for example, that is the super app, as we call. It's like our WhatsApp, but more complex, and you can do a lot of things with this. But the Communist Party control also this. And for example, in 2019, I was in Zhongguancun, that is the Beijing Silicon Valley, and I met a lot of managers who were very happy to show me how they can control every kind of contents. For example, also images or also slang. You know, with Chinese characters, Chinese netizens can do a lot of jokes. We saw them during the Jasmine Revolution, or the so-called Jasmine Revolution some years ago. They use the Chinese characters to create memes that means something with another kind of pronunciation. And for example, when there was the revolution in Egypt, they use IG, that sounds like Egypt, but they use the characters that means love the chicken in the end. No, they can do a lot of things, but it's like a challenge between netizen and Communist Party. But in the end, nowadays, the Communist Party create a great business on the censorship. There are a lot of offices of censorship of the Communist Party in every kind of companies, in every kind of media. So first control. Then the second aspect of censorship in China is the way in which the Communist Party managed the discussion. So we don't have only the censorship of some topics, but we have a lot of people that went online to, with comments or with posts, they try to defend the government, to defend the Chinese Communist Party. We have the experience of the so-called 50 army cents, people that gain 5 Mao every post they put on internet. So it's more sophisticated, and it has the worst consequences of this is the self-censorship. So everyone in China thought that if you try to say something the Communist Party doesn't like, will have very bad consequences. So decided not to say anything. This is a very bad and I think the worst consequence. So people are completely have fear to say what they really think. Of course, we have we saw many cases in which the censorship doesn't work. For example, during the epidemic in Shanghai or in other places where we know something that happens without censorship, but sooner or later the Communist Party could completely block every kind of this content. So something that could spread freedom became a weapon in the hands of the Communist Party to control completely the propaganda machine. And I think that with Xi Jinping, it's going every day worse.
I would like also to know, Simone, if you are aware of the customers of this system of control. I read somewhere that there are foreigners companies that are interested in buying this system of control from the Chinese high technology companies. So I don't know if you know something about this. So later maybe you can say something about this point. Let's go back to Badiucao. You said before that you use the web as a tool and the web to commit people in doing performances and so on. So I would like you to say to us how you organized and which was the aim of the 4th of June project you did online with people, and also something about Wuhan diaries.
Thank you, Electra. Firstly, I actually like to echoing with Simone's uh, discussion on the censorship. One of the reason funding I realize is even for the most developed area like AI generated image, those websites like DALL-E from OpenAI or Stable Diffusion, that's very avant-garde tool for creating art. When this AI is coming from Baidu or other Chinese company, it's already rolling out the censorship system. I mean, we're talking about the most fresh, uploaded software and technology that are online, allowing people to just creating images via typing into a sentence. But if you're using the Chinese version, if you're typing in Chinese, there are certain words that you will not be able to use, like the Tiananmen Square, the Tiananmen Massacre, even Xi Jinping, the Chinese premier, Chinese president's very name. Um, so for me, it's like a constant struggle. You know, on one hand, I have to figure out a way that using my art to going around this censorship system and find its way to approach to my audience back in China. But on the other hand, I do feel the strong desire and the willing for people to join in certain campaign or activities. And this is where actually performance art or activist art can help a lot. Um, Several years ago, I did this project that actually nothing too complex, just in order to memorizing the tank man, the guy who stood very bravely in front of the tank in 1989 after the Tiananmen massacre. I did a performance which is basically cosplay, how Tankman dress up, like wearing a white shirt, a black pants, and doing a gesture like what he did back in 1989. And I just write down how you can do it with the clothes that you need, the way that you can engage with the activity, and when you can, you know, take photo and upload it online, and just sharing this plan with social media on Twitter. Then there are a lot of people around the world. There are Chinese people. There are people who knows about this very terrible but important historic event, all join in with this art performance. And I started receiving a lot of photos of those people who dressed up like Tankman, cosplayed the Tankman, and did a performance in the public space before taking the photo and sent it to me. So now this work is actually being made into a video work that's showing in my exhibition in Europe, in Prague, which is also a part of the work that showed in Brescia last year. So this is how I engage with this form of art. Currently, I'm actually working on a new work, but this time it's a sound work, and it's also about Tiananmen massacre. I'd like to introduce a little bit about it because, again, it's a work that engage into public interaction. So there was this very short video produced by BBC, about 7 seconds, during the Tiananmen movement, and the video is like there's a British journalist just interview a very young protest from China. He's riding on a bike, and the conversation is so simple. The journalist asked him, where are you going? And this young man said, well, I'm going to the Tiananmen Square for protest. Then the journalist asked, why? Why do you want to go? And the young man gives one of the brilliantest smile I ever seen and said, why? I think this is my duty. And just this clip, just this clip becomes so viral on Twitter among the Chinese community, and also the people who are inside of China also knowing this video. To an extent, the conversation that happened in this video, um, the young guy said, "Why? I think it's my duty." The very word of duty, was a sensitive word that forbidden on the anniversary of Tiananmen massacre last year and the year before last year. So this video becomes such an important thing, but again, it's censored. So I have this idea. I want people to repeating this sentence, repeating these conversations. So I make a calling on social media, on Twitter, and asking people to record their own voices to answering this question and to saying, I think this is my duty to protest. And I'm receiving again dozens and hundreds of videos and audios from the people who want to be a part of the movement, which keep the spirit of the Tiananmen movement alive. So for the Wuhan Diary, it was also a work that initiated from online, from internet space, and that is about China's COVID lockdown, a very brutal COVID lockdown, which happens in Wuhan. Wuhan is the city where got hit by this virus, the very first on this planet. And the Chinese government's reaction is just terrible. Initially, they try to covering the truth of the virus. They lock up the whistleblower doctor who tried to warn the society. Then they starting to rolling out this very inhumane lockdown that keep the people inside of their cities and homes, starving and worry about life. But on the other hand, they also creating this information black hole to forbidden residents from city like Wuhan to telling the world what is really going on, to even ask help from outside. So I made this calling on internet, saying that I am willing to be the voice for the Wuhan residents, because I know if they publicly speak up about their struggle and tragedy, then that person will be arrested immediately. So I said, I would like to be your voice. I'll help you to share your story to the world, and I can keep your identity sealed. In the meantime, let me be your speaker. And the Wuhan Diary is from one of the residents who is very brave and decided to share a daily experience of lockdown to me for 100 days. So it became a very important and complete recorder for the very first lockdown in China because of COVID. And now we know the Chinese government did not giving up this very brutal zero COVID policy and lockdown, and not just Wuhan, more and more cities are suffering from it, including my own hometown, Shanghai. And this just happened in this year, and it's already past 2 years since the first lockdown in Wuhan. But guess what? Nothing has been changed. The same formula of lockdown, the same formula of brutality. We see a very similar tragedy like children, old people get starving, not enough food, not enough medicine. We see pets, dogs, and cats got just killed without permission of the owner due to speculation of virus or contagious of spreading. So all of those tragedies has been continuing from the very beginning of the lockdown in Wuhan. And it proves that the Chinese government never acknowledge the problem of its policy and never improve itself. But without the help of internet, without the help of the people who decide to use the internet to become their voices, I wouldn't be able to obtain this very important diary, a very important proof of what is happening in China.
It is very important to be a witness somehow, a witness who is not there for Wuhan or for Tiananmen, but is still witnessing what is happening. And I would like to come back, Simone, to this part we just mentioned, which is the proudness of Chinese high technology managers in presenting these control tools. And if you can tell us something more from about what I asked you before, but also if you want to open a little bit the border. Of course, China is a big part of humanity, but we are living in out of the borders of the control of the Chinese web, but as well also in our world there is an important part of control and also of use political use of the web.
Yes, starting from your first question, of course, if you want to learn how to censor content, how to control the people, you have to go to the master. And in this case, Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party, is the most important university in this kind of topic. No, so for example, we have a lot of government that in the past knocked the door to China asking help to build something like Chinese did. For example, Turkey, Russia, of course, and Iran, not great example of democracy, of course. But there are many things about this because we are talking about censorship. But nowadays, China is a technological superpower, and so China exports a lot of tools of control. Not only how to control the internet, but also how to control people on the real life, because we are talking about surveillance cameras and all these kind of technological tools. China use it in China, especially in some areas. For example, in Xinjiang, that is a very, very, very incredible experiment by the Chinese government of repression, control and repression of people using a lot of technological tools. For example, some tool that can scan completely every kind of mobile phone they found in a lot of checkpoints. So, for example, if Uyghurs, the ethnicity minority of this part of China, it's enough to have on the mobile phone WhatsApp to be taken and put in a jail. So all these kind of tools are very important for a lot of countries that want to control people as China does. But we have to be very careful because also a lot of democratic countries buy these kind of tools. We have a lot of, for example, in Italy, we have a lot of public offices also that use HK vision cameras that are produced in China. And for example, during the last government, the Draghi's one, the government used the used the procedure to stop, for example, some some business like this. Because what is the risk or what is the fear of democratic government? That using these kind of tools, all our data immediately goes to the Chinese government. We don't have the proof of this, but it's possible, of course. Then we have to not to project on China our technological concerns, okay? Because it would be very easy to say, and maybe simple for us to say, oh, China is dystopia, they are very bad. Of course they are, because we have a lot of proofs that they are doing a lot of things to control the people. When I was in China during 2019, then I wrote a book that is called Red Mirror, that is just about the surveillance state in China. I met a lot of companies that control compounds 24 hours a day, and they have a lot of data of every people that is living there. They can know everything about them. And we saw some kind of, and these data they have are very important, and we saw the importance of these data during the pandemic. For example, Chinese government was able to find every person in every part of the country very easily. But we have to know that something very similar is happening also in our society. First of all, the cameras, the control of citizens. We think that security could be important, and so we can accept a lot of control even here. Of course, we are in a democracy, so we can say we don't like it in China. Chinese people cannot. But for example, on the web, we as Europeans are very lucky because we have an important privacy law that don't allow every state to do what they want. But we have also a lot of disinformation on our websites, on our apps, and so this, for example, we have it's a very teeny border between disinformation and censorship. Okay, so we have to watch very carefully. We have to look very carefully what happens in China, just to prevent that something similar could happen here. Of course, in a different way, because we are not an authoritarian state. But for example, we have to be careful about our data, because we are living in a world in which our data are the new oil, as a lot of experts said. So the source of a lot of companies' business is our data. For example, we put our picture on Instagram. We think we are doing something to say hello to some friends, but we are going to help the facial recognition industry. So we have to know that data are important here as are in China. Then, of course, there are a lot of differences, and China is an example where we have not to go. But we have to be very careful because, for example, in China, there is this system, the social credit system, that is not really a scoring system, but it's very, very close to this kind of thing. European Union banned this kind of application, this kind of system, but we have already some examples, even in Italy, in which some city try to create something like this. We have to be very careful about this. We have to be responsible of what happens in our virtual world, because we can see a lot of bad examples in China, in Russia, and in a lot of countries nowadays, because there are many countries, not democratic countries, than democratic countries. We saw now during the Ukrainian war. Of course, we stand with Ukrainian, but a lot of countries doesn't. Okay, so we have to preserve our democracy. We have to defend our democracy. Also, put attention on how our life, our data are used by the companies and by the government in the Western countries as well.
As you were speaking, I was thinking that in my home country, in Greece, they decided in 1989 to burn out all the files of the political prisoners and the political files they had in the police stations. And maybe this could be sometimes a solution to burn them out, because if you leave them, you never know who is going to use them somehow, even if for the historical research it was a destruction of capital, but at the same time there are also this problem that if somebody is coming and is bad, always can use data against you. So Badiucao, I would like to ask you also something more about what is happening when an artist like you is having harassment in the web from common people, machines, tools that are actively attacking your position and your information.
I mean, for me now, in a daily life, I would receive death threats almost every day from all different platforms, from Twitter, from Instagram, from Facebook, you name it. It's kind of endless. You starting to get used to it by growing a very thicker skin, because you're starting to taking it seriously. When you realize it's really a part of the campaign that trying to control your emotion, destroy your confidence, and make you doubt yourself. So me as an artist, I think I'm lucky in a way that I have tools and language to transform this trolling into art, because everything happened to my life can be materials. But I do know that some of my fellow activists, dissidents, who are not coping with this kind of harassment very well. Some of the people are really going through terrible times. I have this very young journalist friend, who's a girl, who worked for New York Times and ABC before. And then she worked on some very important reports of the Uyghur genocide that happened in China. And after that, the Chinese government starting to really targeting her as the enemy of the state. To an extent, they even make fake pornography about her and spreading this information all over the internet, not just on Twitter, Instagram, but also sending it to her family members and friends back in China, in a way to 360 degrees destroy a person's credibility, confidence, and relationship. So it's never just a harassment that online. It's always uh, connecting to the real life, to the real people as well. They're doing it in order to making you feel doubting your life, but also in a way to pollute um, the search result of your name. So in a way that if people want to know Badiucao, want to know my art creation, and if they search my name, well, inside of China, it will be forbidden words, but outside of China, because of all those smear campaign, harassment, and misinformation about my identity, then when people search it, they cannot really find the good results. It creates a new war around my true identity and my art practice, so that people would have a wrong understanding of me as a person, as an artist, as an activist.
It is really, something that I would be very, very scared by this action, by this bullying. So I know that the idea of braveness is not part of your perception of your being artist, but at the same time, virtual life and real life are so connected in this moment that it's not possible to say that something going on in the net is not affecting your real life. And this bullying is really, government bullying, which is the same that happens sometimes with kids, with teenagers, and
Yeah.
they could be destroyed by this. Simone, how can we protect ourselves? Let's pass in this. Let's try to step on an idea of what we can do, because if we live in this fear, we could be, just frozen by this fear.
Yes, I would say that we are in a very different situation. Chinese people cannot say what they want to say because they risk jail. If someone writes something the government doesn't like, there are bad consequences. Not only if you are a normal person. 1 year ago, I think they censor also the ex-premier. Wen Jiabao wrote a letter because his mother died, and it was censored. It's crazy, no? The next premier, he was the number 2 of Chinese standing committee of the Politburo. So we are talking about, not the president, but the premier. And there are a lot of consequences also for Communist Party members as well. Nobody is safe completely, except of course Xi Jinping. And so our risk is different, because we can say what we want. We don't have this kind of consequences, but we have to be very clear to understand how to protect ourselves. Maybe first of all, we have to know what, for example, companies does with our data, but also states. For example, Cambridge Analytica was a big scandal that gave us an overview of how the social media can interfere with real life. It doesn't mean that we have to be like the ludist and destroy, as you said, the machines, the computers, or go to live in some remote place without any connection with the world. It means we have to be responsible of our behavior and to protect our privacy. I usually said that, for example, I did a lot of conferences about privacy, and I suggest also to a lot of people to use, for example, a lot of very easy tool for the mail, like PGP or these kind of things. Very easy, and everyone can use. And a lot of people told me, I have nothing to hide. Of course, you have nothing to hide. But in the ancient time, when I was young, we write a letter, we put in a box, and then we use our tongue to close it. We have nothing to hide, but this is our information. This is our privacy. We have to defend our privacy. So why suddenly we don't care about our data, about our normal private life? Then, of course, if we give all our data to the companies, maybe they can suggest us to buy this, to buy that. But who knows what can do with this kind of data? All the government, especially in an historical moment in which the concept of democracy, is not very clear. We have a lot of countries, even in Europe, we cannot say they are democracy. Hungary, for example, Poland, and are very close to us. So it's something that we have to manage as European, not only as Italian or French or German. And we have to be aware of what could happen if we don't care about our information. And to do this, there is a responsible use of our tools. We have to think that technological tools are not the solution for everything. And we have to know how to protect ourselves by the bad use that companies and government can do of this. And I think that what happened in a lot of countries like China, for example, can tell us how important are our freedoms, our freedom of speech, our chance to say what we think, to participate to the public political life. Because it's very important we know how to protect ourselves. And we can also suggest something to government. In China, for example, it's impossible to say this, especially during this period, because we have to say that it's real that the Chinese Communist Party used censorship from the beginning. But with Xi Jinping, the situation got worse, very, very, very bad now. I don't want to say that during the Hu Jintao decade in power, it was, funny and it was very easy to say something against the government. No, of course. But with Xi Jinping, we saw not only the censorship, but we saw a very, very hard repression against not only netizens, against professors, against public figure. Now they are doing a very, very strong campaign against platforms, against private companies. So it's something very, very similar to North Korea, what happens in China in terms of freedom of speech and rights of people, okay? And so this is an example where we have not to move. But you know, the government, and I saw sometimes Italian politicians that talk about China. Yes, okay, they say, oh, it's a dictatorship, but they seems really envy the chance of Chinese politicians to do what they want, you know. So we have to defend our privacy, but also the parliament, our constitutional rights. Okay, we cannot forget, because in this historical moment, I think the most important thing is the freedom, and we have to clarify to ourselves how important is freedom, because I'm afraid that sooner or later we can do something the Chinese people did. No, the Communist Party after 1989, after Tiananmen massacre, Deng Xiaoping told the Chinese, "You can become rich, okay, but you give us some of your rights." And in some way, a lot of Chinese accept this kind of pact. So now we have an authoritarian country that is a superpower, that have economic numbers incredible still today, even if it's not very good like some years ago. So who guarantee us that we cannot have some politician that say, okay, you want to grow, you want to become rich, you have to say no to some of your rights. Okay, this is something that I fear very much, especially in this historical moment.
I can add that one of the best description of this very particular and very specific risk has been told by an Israeli historical and sociologist called Harari, and it is so well explained because also Israel started very soon the control of data, the control of people, and this the real hub, a European and Mediterranean hub of this kind of experimentation, which started very, very soon before the 11th of September, and then became so common all over because apparently is good for our safety, for being in security, as you said. So we have also always to see what our neighbors are doing. In that case, inside the country, they have freedom of speech. Israeli people has freedom of speech, but not their neighbors, not the other people living in their part of the world. So it is, you know, a strange idea of democracy just for the good ones and not for everybody. So, Badi, just to, we are our timeline says that we have to finish this conversation, which could be very, very long, but we have to cut some parts. So I like to ask you a few lines about your suggestion of being safe, of protect ourselves.
Well, I've tried to hide myself for 7 years when I started making political art, but I failed. Well, the Chinese government find out my identity eventually. I think to hide your trace online and protect your privacy is really not easy job. And nowadays, it's just getting harder. But there are still some basic line to follow. Firstly, I think it's very important to know what sort of software or apps that you downloaded and installed on your personal device. For me, I know that every apps that associate with Chinese company are likely collecting your private information for the Chinese government as well. Even when we're talking about apps like TikTok, who looks like, or even Zoom, looks like a United States company, but as long as they have a mother company back in China, there is no doubt the Chinese government would have access to your private data through those windows. And well, a lot of news and journalists has proved that actually, for example, TikTok promised the public in the United States, in Australia, saying that the mother company in China will not have access to a lot of private information, but it has been proved that they lied. Actually, in Beijing, they can get access to everything. So do make a very important choice to see what platform you want to be and why you want to be there. Be very careful on sharing your photos, locations, where you're about, what sort of work, your family member. There are a lot of important information that we feel like it's a way to celebrate our identity, show off our success. But in the end of the day, if the platform is free, then you are the product being sold to the people who want to pay. So I think it's very important that I always keep that in mind. And also, when we are surfing and absorbing our information online, we have this delusion that we see everything. But because the profiting model of those major companies, even one like Twitter or Facebook, Instagram, we're not necessarily really seeing the things that are happening in time. Actually, most of the content that we consume would come from push of a AI system or algorithm that is not working on the base of expanding our understanding of the world, but expanding the profits for those companies. So do not blindly trust the timeline happening on any platform or social media. Manually choose different channel for information, and I mean sometimes it can be a kind of trouble because you have spent more time and jumping through different platforms seems like waste of time. But in the end of the day, you have to be responsible for your own source of information, and in order to understand ourselves and our world, sometimes we just shouldn't take the shortcut. We just have to do troublesome works. Yeah.
Thank you, Badi, for your precious suggestion. Thank you to Simone, who had this dialogue with us. I would like to mention who is promoting these lessons. Polo del Novecento, Fondazione Verrà e Istituto Gaetano Salvemini are the main promoters of these conversations and of this huge list of people, discussions, and reflections on in the general frame of populism. So thank you again for being here, and hope to have other chances to speak with you both.
Thank you.
Thanks to you.